Thanks, everyone. It's been fascinating to hear about the public perceptions of your industry. Perceptions, as the saying goes, are reality. We know about that in the media. We're told we create perceptions, indeed misconceptions, but we can also be misunderstood ourselves. And for those on the outside, there is a degree of mystique about the media. Today, I'm hoping I can pull back the curtain and show you inside. It is not as mysterious as you might think. In many ways, we share the same goals as yourselves of creating a stronger and more engaged New Zealand community. Our CEO, Sinead Boucher, spoke to a DairyNZ Leaders Forum late last year about our transformation and some of our shared experiences. I'll recap on some of that rollercoaster ride, and in particular, I want to go over how differently that we operate in the media. I'm hoping to share how our newsrooms have changed, explore what this might mean for you and your industry, and then give you some practical tips on how to take advantage of the footprint and influence that Stuff has got across New Zealand. I'm really hoping I haven't used any pictures of the wrong cows as well. It has been interesting to note the public perceptions about your industry. If I read the research right, you're making progress in addressing public sentiment. Perceptions of dairy farmers on some of those big contentious issues, such as the environment and animal welfare, are improving, and overall most stories that appear in the media about your industry are either favourable or neutral. But moving perceptions takes persistence. Perceptions are like oil tankers. They take a lot of time and a lot of energy to turn around. I'll leave the detailed analysis of those survey results for yourselves, and I'll instead make some points from a media perspective. The first is that regardless of the ins and outs of how you are seen on individual subject areas, you will continue to always be in the public spotlight. This is because what you do as an industry is pertinent to Kiwis, and with that comes curiosity, accountability and scrutiny. Whether that is fair or not, or indeed whether the reporting of your industry is fair or not, you do have to deal with it. And you can do that in several ways. You can deal with it through your input into policy making. You can deal with it through the initiatives you undertake to shift public opinion. You can deal with it through how you promote your industry. And importantly, you can deal with it through your relationships with us, the media. I know you take all these matters seriously. The interest in your industry is not just related to those big controversial issues or headline grabbers such as dirty dairying. There is interest in your field simply by virtue of the industry's importance and value to our country, to our national and local economies, to the national psyche, and to how dairying and farming is woven into the social fabric of our communities. And this is great news for you. And at Stuff, we want to reflect what dairying means to all Kiwis. So the issue for you becomes how to best influence and shape those perceptions about dairying. As far as media goes, that will be a challenge because of the fragmentation of our own industry. Media today is nothing at all like it was 20 years ago, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, and sometimes for me it feels like 5 minutes ago. I can think back to when I first started in media. One of my first tasks was to change the radio station frequencies in the newspaper owner's car to reflect whether he was spending his weekend at his holiday home or staying in town. He could afford the holiday home and the flash car because there were rivers of gold flowing through classified ad pages and therefore right through our entire industry. We wrote stories in the morning, we tinkered a bit with them during the day, we normally buggered off to the pub mid-afternoon, got sub-editors to make a few last-minute changes in the evening, and then the printed product finally dropped into readers' letterboxes the next morning. There were scores of reporters in every newsroom, and in many cases, those stories went through more than half a dozen sets of eyes before they were even published. That was then, this is now. I can't speak for other media organisations, but Stuff is nothing like it was only a few years ago. We're quicker, we're more responsive, and we're smarter in the way we operate. Our journalism is deeper, it's wider, and it's more immersive. Most notably, though, we build our breaking stories in the public eye and live on digital platforms. Our journalism comprises storytelling with words, images, interactive graphics, video, and audio. The podcast we produced on the slaying of the Bain family, called Black Hands, has been downloaded millions of times. We've produced other longer form pieces like The Valley, which we serialised and shared with a traditional broadcaster. We use all manner of technology to produce, to package and to track what we do. We use drones. We are exploring what we do with augmented reality, artificial intelligence, and essentially anything new that comes along. Missing number there. No one has to guess it. Each day we publish some 350 stories, and on an average day we get 6,000 individual reader comments on those stories. We do still deliver our journalism across metropolitan, regional and community newspapers and across our national website staff. But we also have apps, podcast channels, even a voice-activated news service on Amazon Echo. We publish, link and promote our content across all social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat and Instagram. And despite what the New Zealand Commerce Commission contends, we operate in a highly competitive environment. Just consider this for a moment. Almost 3 million New Zealanders use Facebook. Media today is whatever comes to us via our mobile phones, and anyone can create content. This has made it difficult for the average citizen to sort the sheep from the goats, the authentically sourced information from the lies. Even the president of the free world seems to have trouble doing this. The biggest impact for media has been how this digital disruption has cut our advertising base and business foundations from beneath us. Almost all new digital advertising globally now goes to Google and to Facebook. So for us to continue to support our journalism, producing quality content across New Zealand in all those forms I've mentioned, we've had to overhaul our business model. We've done this dramatically and from the bottom up. Otherwise, we would have been obliterated. Our biggest response has been around revenue diversification, trying to find new rivers of prosperity. This is why you see us in markets we would have never even considered before. Have a look at us now. This slide shows our ecosystem of products. Not too long ago, I would have just shown you a long list of newspapers, and I should add that we still have more than 50 print publications. But by diversifying, we are now serving more New Zealanders than we ever have. Our products include Stuff Fibre. This is our super fast fibre internet service. There is a partnership we began last year with Energy Club NZ. Here we supply energy at cost for a low weekly membership. Stuff Picks is a subscription channel we launched just this year, bringing the latest released movies directly into homes. Done is a no-frills health insurance product we've white-labelled with NIB. Who thought we would ever end up in insurance? Then there's Neighbourly, which is our hyperlocal network. Neighbourly is Stuff's little sibling, and it's growing with already 550,000 authenticated and verified members. But the mothership of our digital business is Stuff. Stuff is the biggest digital brand in New Zealand, and we use it to reach our share of content and to leverage those new businesses I mentioned. Notably, from February 1, we became Stuff Limited, because Stuff best represents who we are today. But part of our repositioning has also been to reappraise print. Last week, we changed our format size from broadsheet to compact for 9 of our weekday titles. Critics and naysayers reckon we did it to save money and to ratchet back the content we offer. But the reason we went compact was because that is what readers told us they wanted. Our research, supported by focus groups, found the audience wanted an easier format. Compact has given us an opportunity to rethink, review, and repackage what we do in print. It's an investment in print, and overwhelmingly the initial feedback from advertisers and readers has been positive. Here are just a few of the pages from last week's first compact editions. You'll also note that farming coverage continues to be important to us, and you'll see quite a few stories about dairying, which it's only been a week, so I promise you hasn't been a setup. As you know, as part of that reappraisal of print, we're selling some of our community and rural titles. This is a separate issue to why we moved our weekday titles to compact, and it's unfortunate that we've had to divest ourselves of some of these publications. But the brutal truth is we can't commit resources to unprofitable activities or those that distract us from our core strategy. We've had to resize our own herd. Where we can, we have sought to transfer those titles to new owners. And regardless of whether we're still in print in those areas, we remain in those communities. We'll continue to surface stories important to the rural sector, and those stories actually have a bigger audience than ever before because our more diverse ecosystem of media properties. Stuff, our national website, for example, reaches more than 2 million people every month, which is a huge stage for rural stories. A benefit of our transformation is how we're using data to target what we do. In our newsrooms today, we use analytics to help us make objective and fact-based decisions around the stories that we publish. That's one of the misconceptions I think that people have about journalists, that they run their own agenda. We take our responsibility to hold authority to account, to keep the buggers honest, as we say in the newsroom, very seriously. We don't resile from telling tough and at times grim stories that are in the public interest. Because of that, though, journalists tend to cop a lot. Every poll that we take rates us low in the reputation stakes, which I personally find very ironic given the work that we do. Another misconception is that journalists will do anything to sell a newspaper or that we're driven by clickbait journalism. Of course, we want to continue to make our content be popular, but this notion that we sensationalise or embellish stories is not the stuff that we are made of. I can only speak for my news force, and we've got 500 journalists up and down the country. I'd be horrified to learn if any of those reporters were whipping up untruths or perpetuating fake news. To be blunt, we leave that for social media, where it really is a free-for-all. We have clear standards about what we publish, and we are accountable for that. Another misconception is that journalists are only interested in the negative. This is far from true for us at Stuff, and the data shows us that our most popular stories are quite a mixed bag. In the past year, the biggest rating stories for us have included the election, Cyclone Gita, the Commonwealth Games, and quite significantly for me, our social issues project 1 in 5 million, where we allowed readers to compare themselves to other Kiwis to walk in their neighbours' footsteps. The environment also features as highly with our audience as it does for the public who judge you. And among the big environmental stories just this year have been Thin Ice, a piece we just did about the rapid retreat of our glaciers, the sale of our high country land, and a profile of our sub-Antarctic islands. And those 3 stories alone have been viewed more than 750,000 times. So given all this, what does it mean for you? I think there are some opportunities that beckon, and today I'll try and offer you 7 practical tips, and I apologise in advance if any of those sound like I'm telling you how to suck eggs. Firstly, and this is the big one, build a positive and constructive relationship with us. We're your neighbours, your family, your friends, and we're really not that much different to you. We have the same aspirations, and I say call reporters. They want to hear from you. In fact, they're probably more approachable than most people because their job is to talk to people and to listen to what is going on in their world. But how well do you know us, and how well do we know you? With a good foundation in place, we can get to know the intricacies of your industry, and you can become familiar with how we operate. Media, as I've explained earlier, is pretty complex today. Farming news can make the homepage of Stuff or the front pages of our newspapers. Farming news can constitute hard or breaking news, environmental news, business news, and of course rural news. And the sign of a good relationship is when all is not fair weather. It's when you can one day agree to disagree and the next day collaborate on a project. Secondly, help us to tell your stories, big and small. Dairy farming is interesting to our audiences. They want to know what is up in your sector. Sending a press release, though, and hoping it gets a run in the local paper is old school communications. Don't limit the chance to showcase all of the cool stuff that you might be doing. Today, there are more channels than ever before to get your stories out. And this is a fact, not a boast, but Stuff has the biggest audience and the greatest reach in New Zealand. Your industry, DairyNZ, is really proactive with its media, but I think it's not just up to the industry body alone to pitch stories. You could all come to us directly. Our job is to talk to you about what constitutes a story and how we best tell those stories worth pursuing. When you have a significant story or campaign, give us an early heads up. Bring us into your trust early, which can be the catalyst for better storytelling. We might then be able to deploy a visual journalist or a videographer or a more immersive audience experience. Or the subject matter might lend itself to a more detailed, longer form piece of journalism. Maybe we could get behind your campaign. Other ways you can tell your story is by contributing opinion pieces to us, letting us know about your events, and alerting us to research. We can do some really amazing things online now with data journalism. But I would also say be realistic. Life is not always a bed of roses, and we won't be a PR machine. Our job is not to sugarcoat issues. You can expect to hear more stories about water and cow numbers and river quality. The public has a big stake in those issues. They will provoke plenty of commentary which may not always go your way, particularly across social media. As for coverage about Fonterra, it's our largest company, and of course it is going to attract huge coverage. Our reporters may sometimes come across as your inquisitors, but that's only part of our role. More often than not, we can also be your champion and offer you a forum for your views. And I would encourage and challenge all of you to grab and seek those opportunities. Kiwi farmers have an endearing, straight-shooting way of saying things. The public loves that laconic, authentic type of speaking. Increasingly, though, jargon and corporate speak is invading our language, and it is a disease that we detest in journalism. I often say to kill the weasel words, things like paradigm, facilitator, and nutrients, and everything today is about sustainability. So much so that that word has very little meaning anymore. Indeed, I think it has become quite unsustainable. So farmers of New Zealand, I implore you to continue to speak your mind and to make it plain. And similarly, you should be equally as straight up in how you deal with reporters. If you're not sure about the boundaries of an interview, clarify this in that same no-nonsense sort of way. If you feel pressured to comment, ask if you can think about the matter for an hour or so and then call back. We don't expect farmers to have necessarily the same media nous as chief executives or politicians, so let's have plain speaking, common sense conversations. The other tip I would give you is that storytelling is all about people. This is how we love to tell our stories, through people's eyes and how people are impacted. Our own statistics show that the biggest farming stories have been just that. For example, the impact of the early death of a farmer on his local community, the devastation that storms and other calamities have had on farming communities, the mental health struggles of those on the land, the environmental impact of farming, and a host of stories that we cover about great characters up and down the country. This next tip is for when the proverbial does hit the fan though. If you feel you're getting a rough deal from what the media does, the worst thing you can do is to take a siege mentality. Usually you are better served, and you better serve your constituency by explaining your position. I believe it's a good rule to live by. It's about transparency. So if you feel you're not getting a fair deal, seek redress. Don't stew on it. Talk to the relevant editor or talk to me. We do get things wrong, and where we do, we will correct the record. My last tip, and this is as much of a note to myself as it is to yourselves, is to do whatever you can to build trust. Trust is the most valuable currency we have going. Your reputation will inoculate you in tough times. It will underpin how your products are seen in the market, and it will determine your success over the long term. Once upon a time, slick marketing, brand advertising, and PR could present a pretty facade for an industry. Social media now, though, means anyone can publish and everyone is watching. The power base has moved to the consumer. That is the same for us. Over generations, both of our industries have built trust with their respective communities. Never take that for granted. So I hope that has been of some benefit. I'd like to congratulate DairyNZ and its members on its strategic work in challenging times. I don't think I've used the word innovate once in this presentation, and that's deliberate because innovation for you guys and for us is the new norm. If you have to think about whether you're innovating or not, then you probably aren't. Most of you would be breaking new ground in your own way. New Zealand dairy farmers on the whole and on many fronts have not only embraced change but have blazed something of a trail globally, and they will continue to diversify. I think that dairy farming constitutes an incredible story. It's a story that not all of us, including me, will always appreciate coming from the big cities, but it's a story that is important for the future prosperity of our nation and its communities. It's a story that's probably just as important to our sense of self as Kiwis, and it's a story that I hope that we can help you to tell. So thank you very much for having me here today.